souls shipwrecked in the mid-Atlantic, and the horrific fate of over 1,000 who never made it.
The screams were just terrible.
A story that's never been fully told.
Right here, fin on the surface.
This investigation will lead me on a global journey to uncover what really happened in the water that night. It will take me deeper than I've ever been before, down into the abyss, to confront sea monsters in their own domain.
I feel like an astronaut landing on the moon.
The sinking of the British passenger steamer RMS Laconia has haunted me since I first heard about it. It's one of the most famous stories of the Second World War. I've learned about dramatic new evidence that suggests there's far more to this story than first meets the eye. On September the 12th, 1942, the RMS Laconia was sailing in the mid-Atlantic, bound for England. She was carrying civilians and soldiers returning home, and hundreds of Italian prisoners of war bound for internment camps in the UK. Several days from safety and hundreds of miles from land, she was attacked by a German U-boat. 2 torpedoes struck her starboard side in quick succession. The Laconia started to take in water fast. Accounts talk of stunned passengers and crew scrambling to escape. Italian POWs broke out of their holding cells and tried to force their way off the stricken ship. Some attempted to board the already overloaded lifeboats, but were fought off by Allied soldiers. The scene turned into a bloodbath. At first glance, this is an open and shut case. For decades it has been assumed that most of the passengers and POWs drowned, and those who didn't were taken by sharks. But I've always wondered whether that was the whole story. My previous investigations have often shown that the answer is seldom what is first assumed. And now I have a chance to find the true culprits. Because buried deep inside this archive, I've discovered a forgotten cache of eyewitness accounts, full of clues that could turn this story on its head. Many hundreds of people ended up in the water, where some mysteriously just disappeared, dragged beneath the surface with only their life jackets ever re-emerging. Bodies found by rescuers days later had been attacked by creatures in the water, and of those, a number showed bite marks that still don't point to any obvious perpetrator. This new evidence suggests multiple mystery attackers, but what were they? With over 1,000 victims, this will be a huge and complex case. But using the accounts of those who lived through it, I'm going to find out what happened to those who didn't. The people who wrote those eyewitness accounts are long gone, but there is one survivor who I have managed to find. I'm on my way to meet a woman who was actually on the Laconia that night. She is one of only a handful of survivors who are still alive today. At the time, she was just a 14-year-old girl, and she was fleeing the war in Singapore, and she was travelling with her mother, her father, and her brother. What happened when suddenly it was no longer normality on the boat at that point?
It was 8 o'clock and the first torpedo struck. It was awful. But by the time you gathered your senses, the second one hit.
Josephine and her family only had minutes to get up on deck.
My father threw the life jackets at us, and he said, "Come on, lifeboat stations." We dropped everything, rushed out of the cabin. The screams were just terrible. It was total chaos. They lowered our lifeboat to the sea, and the minute it hit the water, people were trying to climb into it as well. They were having to be pushed away. We couldn't take any more. I witnessed an Italian prisoner of war being shot by a man in our lifeboat. He was trying to get on and he was shot. That was war. War at its worst. So the men rowed, and they rowed, and they rowed. And we managed to get quite away from the ship. And when we looked, the stern came up, and then it went down, and then everywhere was pitch black. The next day, I realised the water was pink because there was so much blood. And that was when I realised that there were sharks, because you could see the tips of the fins at one stage, and then, you know, now and again you'd get one a bit nearer because they'd been circling the boat. It was awful.
I'm not surprised that Josephine saw sharks. I know they are part of this story. But tellingly, she says that she didn't see them until the next day. I know that in the immediate aftermath, people were attacked by something. But if it wasn't sharks, then what was it?
This is the biggest case I've looked into by far. When you're looking at something that happened in the middle of 75 million square miles of ocean, where on earth do you start?
The Laconia's last recorded position was 5 degrees south and 11 degrees west in around 12,000 feet of water, 700 miles from mainland Africa. Trying to operate at the site of the sinking would be a logistical impossibility. But I get lucky. I receive permission to travel to a military base. A tiny speck of land just 250 miles from where the Laconia went down, known as Ascension Island.
Ascension is one of the most remote islands anywhere on Earth. It's right slap bang in the middle of the Atlantic, sort of halfway between Africa and South America. But most importantly for me, it's the closest I can get to the scene of the incident.
Ascension is a British and US military base, and travel to the island is heavily controlled.
Evening.
Got to Ascension?
Yeah, Ascension flight, yeah.
Gaining access to Ascension is one thing, but now my whole investigation hinges on what fish I find when I get there. No one lives here permanently. The vast majority of the 800 or so personnel are on military contracts. What they do is not public knowledge. And some areas of the island are strictly off limits. But it's the vast expanse of water around this speck of land that interests me.
Very few people get to fish here, either recreationally or commercially, which means that the species that are here now are going to be the same ones that were here in 1942.
I now want to see what's in the water around the island. I'm heading to a remote spot which isn't often fished. Beneath the surface here, the land shelves off very quickly. So even with a cast from the shore, I should be on the edge of deep water.
Lovely looking clear water. There are a few beaches here and there on the island, but mostly it's rock and fairly treacherous underfoot. But I just thought while I was trying to get a boat sorted out, I'd come along and get some lures in the water, start to get a feel for what's living around here. Something on. That's the fish on already. First cast. That's a good sign. Right, just going to swing it. It's a grouper. Very impressive sized mouth. Even on a fish this size. So there's certainly predators in these waters.
When you lose everything, these hard-working heroes are ready to help.
Not here to make money, we're just here to make a difference in people's lives.
Aussie Salvage Squad, Wednesday at 10 on Viasat Explore.
Let's make some money.
The world's gutsiest truck drivers return.
Working on my own this year, I think it's going to be better.
Me and Dale have some rough patches, we'll call them.
You're going to pay me!
Come and get it!
This is going to be interesting.
It's alive!
The brand new season of Backroad Truckers, Friday at 10 on Viasat Explore. If cars could talk, imagine what they would say. Thankfully, we've got the Matthewsons to tell their stories.
As far as who would be driving them back in the day, you had gangsters and villains on this hand, and you had accountants and solicitors on the other.
They're a Playboy's car. I'm a Playboy, as you know.
All new season, all new antics.
Oh, my word. Woo.
Bangers and Cash, Friday at 11 on Viasat Explore. In 1851, a prospector discovered flecks of gold in an Australian waterhole. "Hey, Steve," he said, "look at this beauty." Since then, thousands have come seeking their fortune, and they keep on coming.
There's no better time to be a gold miner than right now.
It's the dawn of a new golden age on the home of Aussie gold hunters. Weekdays at 8:10 on Viasat Explore.
G'day everyone, here's the latest traffic update. There's a proper jam on the Newell Highway thanks to a shed load of frozen chips.
Pack it in there real tight for you.
In Queensland, dinosaur remains are still causing havoc after a caravan crash.
I found a fossil.
Hurry up, stop talking, get back to work.
It's a bit of a dog's dinner, but these crews are getting the job done.
Extreme Tow Truckers on Viasat Explore. Engineers are always pushing the boundaries.
Masterpiece.
But sometimes these boundaries push back.
The roof bouncing, it was crazy.
It was collapsing around me.
Errors of epic proportions with devastating consequences. Massive engineering mistakes on Viasat Explore. Ali and the boys take on an angling tour of France.
The delay adds to the drama, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Stunning locations, new personal bests.
What is going on?
And loads of giant carp.
Yeah. That's what we wanted, boy!
Brand new season, Monster Carp on Viasat Explore.
I waste no time getting my lure back into the water. And it's not long before something else hits it.
Oh! I can see something out there. It's being followed by several fish. Lovely fish. A blackjack. That is definitely a predatory fish. Some sharp teeth. The way it hammered that lure on the surface. The thing about the lure I'm using at the moment is that it makes a lot of disturbance. It's visual, it's also sound as well. And fish are, they're all opportunists, particularly predators. They come in and have a look. And even when this one was on the line, there's other fish chasing this. It's just a very good beginning to my education about this particular part of the ocean. Off it goes. Right. This is an oceanic triggerfish, so called because of that spine on the back, a bit like a trigger on a gun. And what they do is they jam that in the open position like that to hold themselves in coral. They often go to sleep like that at night. And look at the teeth on that. Those are sort of coral munching teeth. But it actually went for a lure. The thing that's quickly becoming apparent to me is how rich these waters are, also how competitive the fish are. You get one fish on the end of the line or one fish showing interest and it sort of calls in the other fish. And I think in terms of my investigation, I think this could be pretty significant.
The seas here are teeming. There's little doubt about that, even from just a few hours fishing. But I don't think that the fish that hit my lures today would have been present or of any significance that night when the Laconia sank. But they do give me a vital behavioural clue. A struggling fish on the line attracts the interest of other predators. And what I saw here today was how quickly that happens. Undoubtedly, the Laconia sinking was an event in the ocean, not just for the people involved, but also for the animals that live there. There would have been no shortage of distress signals in the water that night, with over 1,000 people floundering at the surface. The question is, would those signals have been enough to start a feeding frenzy in the open ocean? The accounts of eyewitnesses suggest that they would have been. One thing I'm coming across again and again is that a lot of the people in the water that night speak of being attacked by schools of large, aggressive, silvery fish. Take this from Ian Peel, who was one of the many people who was in the water who hadn't been able to get a place in a lifeboat. Immediately I heard cries of shark, but it wasn't a shark I saw, but huge numbers of large silvery fish slicing and attacking at will. Even more formidable than a shark. The obvious culprit is the barracuda, a fish I've encountered before. But I can eliminate them from the suspect list because, ferocious as they are, they tend to school and hunt around coastal reefs, not in deep open ocean. So what exactly was Ian Peel describing? The mid-Atlantic is new territory for me, and I'm working with limited information. But somewhere out there, there's the silvery predator that was first on the Laconia scene, and I've got to work out a way to find it. The best way to cover a large search area is to use a technique called trolling.
Whenever you're fishing, the biggest question is where are you going to put your bait? And in this immensity of water, that's a very big question. But with the island here, there's a plateau where it gradually gets deeper, out to a couple of hundred feet, and then in a very short space, it plunges down to a couple of thousand and then keeps on going. And what we're going to do is going to fish on the move and just go along the drop-off with lures out the back.
The survivors' accounts describe the fish that drew first blood as being medium-sized and fast. So that's what I'm going for.
On the big rod we're going to put this. This is, you can see that mimics a fish in the water. This is quite significant because what happens, the water catches that as we're moving and it pushes it down. It makes it dive and it gets a good wiggle on. Cirrus hooks on here. Thick wire because quite likely if anything hits this it's going to have teeth. In fact, you can see it's been hit a few times by some toothy creatures. So off we go.
We work our way along the drop-off. To increase my chances of a take in the vast mid-Atlantic, I have 2 different lures working at the surface and 2 deeper down.
The lures have definitely got the attention of the birds, so they've got to look fairly convincing. The fact is, it's something happening on the surface here which just triggers the attention. And we're hoping the same will happen beneath the surface as well, getting fish to come up and investigate.
As first on the Laconia scene, my silvery suspect was clearly curious and quick. One of the reels is emptying. Something has taken the lure.
Screaming take. Is that off or is it just coming towards me? Yeah. That was hooked up for 20 seconds or so, but it came off. Sometimes happens. It's interesting, you're just covering water, nothing's happening, and then just out of nowhere, suddenly the reel is screaming. But in this case, just as quickly, it's gone. Dolphins beside the boat. This is a really good sign. The rod tip's really banging away there, and that's indicative of the lure down there really pushing out some vibrations. It's like the dinner gong going off, and I've got a good feeling about that.
Out here in the middle of the ocean, there's no significant landmass to stop the huge Atlantic swells. Then another take on the same rod. This time, I'm hoping it will stay hooked.
This is steaming away, steaming away. Haven't seen it yet at all. It's quite a rapid kick, whatever it is. I think I've got a bit of colour. I can see something down there. Oh, there it is, there it is. I think, yeah, there we go.
I've landed a silvery fish and an energetic one. But is this the fish that drew first blood?
Skipjack. It's almost like a bit of metal, isn't it? Amazing the energy it's got. It's actually very mirror-like, and actually in open water, that's very effective camouflage. If you're about the same kind of depth as that, it's just going to bounce the light off and it's almost going to disappear into the background. But then if you're looking down on it, it's dark. So it's perfect counter shading.
I don't think this skipjack is the silvery predator that the eyewitnesses talk about. These fish just don't have the hardware to inflict the sort of wounds described.
Off he goes.
I'm going to try a different approach by using to my advantage the strong currents that swirl around the island. Maybe it was scent rather than sight that brought in the predators that night.
There's a whole sardine on the end here, and the boat is drifting, so we're just going to slowly drift. We'll keep some chum going in the water, just to bring the small stuff in, get some activity going, and hopefully bring in the bigger predators.
Oils from these pieces of fish leave scent trails in the water. And the predators here quickly find my bait. Something fast almost empties my reel.
Fish took right next to the boat. Look at that thing go, leaping in the air.
The fish is desperately trying to throw the hook. Then my line goes slack.
It's off. What? Oh, it's still there. It's just running towards me. If I had any doubt about these waters being rich, here's a bit of confirmation there. Oh, this is a good sized Dorado one.
This clearly isn't a silvery assailant, but it is a powerful predator in its own right and worth a closer look.
Beautiful fish, look at that. Dorado means gold, but look at all the blue on there. Also known as mahi-mahi dolphin fish.
Those acrobatic leaps are totally in character for a hunter that takes out flying fish.
It's still got a lot of strength actually, I can feel it flexing.
But despite their obvious strength and agility, Dorados have never been known to pose a threat to humans.
Off he goes. Ooh, strong fish.
These waters are teeming with predators, but so far my catches don't match the descriptions in the eyewitness reports. Doubts are creeping into my mind. The information I have is just too scant. My search parameters are too wide. Given the richness of these waters and the sheer scale of the search area, I need to somehow narrow my focus to stand any chance of catching this elusive killer. I go back to the eyewitness accounts and come across one with an interesting clue. Jim McLaughlin was deep inside the ship when the first torpedo hit. He writes that the noise was crushing, that it felt like he'd been punched in the head by a powerful fist of sound, turning his head to putty. He goes on to say that inside the Laconia, pandemonium had erupted. People screaming, everyone pushing and shoving, clutching at his legs. Some of them falling back into the darkness of the hold below. Jim made it off the stricken Laconia to the relative safety of an emergency raft, but it's in the water where his problems really began. He writes that he was resting on the raft, alone in the pitch dark of the night, when suddenly he felt the most excruciating pain in his left calf. He drew his legs onto the raft in a blind panic, and his first thought was that he'd been bitten by a shark. But when he looked down at his calf, he saw gruesome, fang-like puncture marks. There are any number of predatory schooling fish like the two I've already found in these waters, but this new evidence narrows my search. Jim's description of fangs is striking and could be a breakthrough lead. There is one schooling predator that might fit the bill, with silvery flanks and vicious fangs. It's a member of the snake mackerel family, and it inhabits a vast range throughout the Atlantic. It's called the snook. At this time of year, though, they aren't in open ocean, but in vast breeding schools along the coast of South Africa. So that's where I'm headed. The snook could be the fish that drew first blood the night the Laconia went down. But to be sure, I need to catch one. I'm fishing out of Cape Town.
I'm going to catch one of these things, but the cookie cutter comes in very quickly and it bites a very clean plug of flesh out of it.
I want to learn more about this elusive and unusual creature. Looking through pictures of other bites strengthens the case against the cookie cutter. These wounds are significantly bigger. Although this unusual predator may be small, less than 2 feet long, its bite can cause serious damage. And yet, that signature bite mark is just about the only evidence that cookie cutters even exist. One thing that is known about them is that they rise towards the surface at night to feed. So in the evening, I head out to try and find signs of one for myself. As far as I'm aware, the cookie cutter has never been caught on a line, so this is a very long shot. But at the very least, I might see what else is feeding in these waters after dark, at the time the Laconia went down.
We're just trying to get into position on the drop-off. About 300 foot of water is what we're looking for, and then we're going to drop down the anchor and we're going to stay here into the night. There we go.
For predatory fish, catching prey as night falls requires a different set of skills. As the sun sets, light in the water begins to fade and sight hunting becomes far more difficult. But some hunters have developed highly tuned senses that detect even the smallest vibrations in the water that panicked or struggling prey send out.
Oh, it's running. Yeah. Okay.
Whatever is on the end of my line is powerful and wants to go deep. Something in the behaviour of the fish has changed.
This was pulling away, pulling, diving really quickly, and suddenly there's a bit of a dead weight now, but it was a very, very lively weight. It's a bit of a mystery. What's going on here? Because it's going away from the boat. Oh, look at this, there's a shark following. 2 sharks. This is steaming away, steaming away. What was on there was half a tuna, and 2 sharks following it. Well, there we go, there's a bare hook, but there's a story behind that bare hook. There was a sizable tuna on the bait originally, and what came to the surface was the front end of a tuna, just the head, but behind it a big sort of yellowy grey shape. 2 shapes, as a matter of fact. What's very interesting and also quite frightening about what just happened is that a tuna is supremely adapted to living in this water. It's very fast, it's very powerful, and in the ordinary course of events, it can keep out of the way of sharks, generally speaking, but as soon as that's in a little bit of trouble, it's on a fishing line, and even though it's on that line, it's still travelling at speed. It's actually easy prey for the shark. So a person in the water, if the shark was so inclined, if a tuna can't get out of the way, then you're not going to.
The Laconia was hit at around 8 p.m. and sank by 9:30, leaving its stranded passengers with a full night of horror ahead. Here on the equator, you don't get long evenings. It gets dark very quickly, sort of 7 o'clock-ish, something like that. And now, 9:30, pitch dark, has been for a couple of hours. I'm using pieces of tuna that I'm going to send down to the bottom. I'm hoping this might at least bring evidence of a cookie cutter. The Atlantic at night is eerily quiet, and apart from the small pool of light from our boat, pitch black. I can't help but make the connection between this boat and the Laconia, and also this time of night. This is about the time of night that the boat went down, and those hundreds of people ended up in this water. Now it's just about keeping alert and feeling for a movement on my line. The movement, when it comes, almost pulls me in.
That's quite a rapid tail these are now. Yeah, this feels quite heavy. It's interesting. It's actually coming up quite quickly. So here we go. Wow. So this is a horse-eye jack. Took down there in about 300 foot of water.
These are sometimes known as big-eyed jacks. They see well in the dark and at depths. They probably share nighttime territory with the cookie cutter, but there are no bite marks to suggest that this one has had an encounter.
Okay, gonna put this back.
And it's not long before something else takes the bait. After its initial pull, it suddenly develops an extraordinary burst of power.
It's going. Right. Oh, it's just going, it's just going, it's just going, it's going, it's going. It's going.
It takes everything I've got to stop it.
This was something that took right on the bottom. Here we go, here it is, there it is. What's that? Half an amberjack. Shark spit it already. When I hooked it, it ran off, stopped, and then it went a second time, and actually now that I think about it, that second time was more powerful, and what that was actually a shark hanging on to this. Well, I think moving on, what I've got to do, I've got to fish heavier line, bigger reel to hold that line, heavy wire on the end, possibly a bigger boat. But this investigation is only just heating up. The sinking of the RMS Laconia and what happened to the hundreds of people who ended up in the water that night is, in terms of numbers, the biggest investigation of my career so far. I've discovered that in all probability they encountered a large school of marauding snook, which ripped through them in a first wave. But now I've got to focus on sharks. The written evidence is scant, but it does show that sharks were definitely there. Right here, fin on the surface, going down. But what kind? And where did they come from? And because the Laconia sank in more than 12,000 feet of water, it means I have to consider not just surface predators on the prowl that night, but potentially killers from the abyss.
War at its worst.
I want to find out what happened to those over 1,000 people who never made it.
This is an absolute beast.
I'm going further and deeper than I've ever gone before to find the killers from the abyss. The reason this case has my interest now is because a forgotten cache of eyewitness accounts has come to light that I think will give me new evidence about what happened that night. So far, my investigation has focused on the silvery predator that these eyewitnesses saw attacking people in the water. And what I've discovered is that the fish responsible was a sleek, fanged, schooling predator of the open ocean called the snook.
That is going to cause a puncture mark.
But I don't think the snook was the only predator there that night. So I now need to find out what else was. I've been given special permission to fish the waters around Ascension Island, a secretive military base in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and the closest anyone can get to the site of the sinking. Fishing these waters at night has already shown me that there are fearsome predators all too willing to attack anything in distress on a line.
Sharks, got it already.
So now I know I'm looking for sharks that hunt in deep, open ocean. Whatever it was that attacked the struggling fish on my line last night was brought in by the vibrations it was sending out. But in the pitch black of night, it's impossible to know what is really going on. I want to recreate that same scenario in daylight to try to understand the chain of events that brings in the bigger predators.
Most of the island is pretty exposed, big swells, big waves, but this spot here, it's also very good in terms of water clarity. It's a bit like an aquarium, so this could be a good place to do a bit of an experiment. The water is certainly very clear. You can see lots of these black triggerfish, but let's see what happens when we put some bait in.
The triggerfish swarm around the bait.
Right, the triggerfish are really reacting to that. I mean, they just instantly, they're on it.
The more bait I put in, the more triggerfish arrive.
I don't think it's the scent, because it hasn't really got time to spread. It's visual, and then I think it's the noise of the first few fish reacting. It just brings everybody else in. I can see on the periphery of this there's other fish coming in. Just the commotion of these fish it's not just the bait hitting the water, it's the reaction of the other fish to it. What I'm going to do now, I'll just lob this over and see if this has any reaction.
My small-scale feeding frenzy hasn't attracted any larger predators. Then suddenly, that changes.
Shark just came from nowhere, I didn't see that approach. Sharks have arrived. It's right under the boat, There's one here. I think that shark's fairly serious about feeding. Very close to the boat, very close to people, doesn't care. And I think the reason that came in was because of all the activity from these other fish feeding.
These reef sharks were almost certainly responsible for the ambush on the fish I hooked last night. And on a small scale, this is a visceral demonstration of how a commotion in the water can quickly escalate into a feeding frenzy. Smaller fish bringing in the bigger predators. But these reef sharks won't stray more than a few miles from the island. The Laconia sank in 12,000 feet of water with no reef in sight. It's not reef sharks I should be focusing on, but open ocean giants. To get a real understanding of what might have attacked the Laconia victims that night, I need to find out what kinds of sharks hunt in these deeper waters. And this time, I'm well prepared.
Just getting some chum cut up to go in the water. Just small bits of fish which will just keep trickling in there at intervals. This creates a certain amount of scent in the water, but the other thing it does, it will bring in small fish, and then the activity of those will bring in larger fish. So we're creating a sort of an event here. We're creating something to make this bit of ocean stand out from all the other space out there.
I know that sharks have an extraordinary ability to pick up scent, but in such an immensity of water, chumming almost seems futile. But I keep the chum going in, which keeps the bait fish feeding near the boat. Then, I get a faint movement on the line.
Oh, there's a knock.
Whatever has taken the bait speeds off. What ensues is a battle that's still in progress an hour later. I winch it in, turn by painful turn.
Sudden slackening then, it could be the fish trying to roll up the line. Thing is, when it does that, is to basically not give it that slack that it needs. Taking line again. Which way's it going? I think it's still here. Yeah, we're close, we're close. That's the leader knot. You can see the fish down there. This is a tiger shark.
Oh, Lord, watch out.
Okay. Is that under the boat? This tiger shark is not giving in. Definitely not coming quietly, this fish. It thrashes and rolls as it attempts to free itself, and it's all I can do to hold it. Oh, That's gone. That's gone. We got the whole bait back, but the hook, it was just somewhere inside the mouth and it hadn't completely penetrated. The thing is, what they do is they roll up the leader, so you haven't got very often that direct pressure on the hook. The hook is, the line goes around the body, and I mean, you'd think, looking at the bend in that rod and the amount of general strain on everything, that hook would have gone in, but no, it was still had a lot of energy when it came to the surface, and basically it just moved around enough to just work that hook free. So yeah, there's more sharks here than we thought. These waters are clearly teeming with active hunting predators. But tiger sharks in the open ocean usually hunt alone, so they are unlikely to have gathered in sufficient numbers to be solely responsible. The Laconia disaster is a 75-year-old mystery, so I need to figure out what sharks were roaming these waters in 1942. Searching the historical records throws up useful information that might help to give me the answer. In the year the Laconia sank, this was far from an isolated incident. The Battle of the Atlantic was reaching its peak. In that year alone, over 1,600 vessels were sunk, resulting in the loss of thousands of lives. Going through the reports of these disasters, I start to see a pattern emerging. Account after account describes the same shark species attacking the people in the water, a shark I have little experience with. The oceanic white tip. But this shark, which patrolled the Atlantic in large numbers in 1942, is now on the endangered list and can only be found in a handful of marine reserves dotted around the world. The reason for this shark's rapid decline is simple. Basically, not long after the end of the war, from about the 1950s or so, commercial fishing on an industrial scale started in the open oceans, and sharks are particularly vulnerable, and it turns out oceanic white tips are one of the most vulnerable species, and it's very hard to come by any definite numbers, but people are saying they've been almost wiped out worldwide. So the fact that they're not here now doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't here in 1942, but if I'm to study these now endangered creatures, population of oceanic white tips. Although it's clear that sharks are a big part of this investigation, and I think there's enough historic evidence to place oceanic white tips in the dock, there's still one question about their involvement that needs answering. According to the Laconia eyewitness accounts, sharks didn't show up until many hours after the sinking. The question I want to answer is why. The Laconia sank in a huge expanse of open ocean where there would undoubtedly have been lone hunting oceanic white tips. But the chances of a large number of sharks being in the exact location where the Laconia sank at that exact time are slim. So what was it that called in these lone sharks in the vastness of the mid-Atlantic? I think there's a clue in the eyewitness accounts.
Take this from squadron leader L.J. Peters, who along with hundreds of others was fighting for his life in the water that night. He'd swum some distance away from the stricken vessel. By the time he stopped and looked back, the Laconia was almost gone, and he found himself surrounded by debris and burning oil on the surface. Then, beneath him, he goes on to write, he heard two huge, booming explosions.
Now, this booming sound is when the boilers, which are under intense pressure, superheated metal, as soon as that hits the water, you get a crack and the whole thing just goes. And this sound would have carried over an enormous distance, much further than the sound of anybody splashing in the water, any shouts, this kind of thing. And I'm just wondering if this might have been what called sharks in, possibly from a very big area of ocean. Now, I don't have the wherewithal to duplicate that scenario, to create a huge explosion underwater. But maybe there is a way that I can investigate the effect that sound has on sharks. And maybe this is going to help me. This is a waterproof underwater speaker. And if the weather's okay tomorrow, if I can get out on the water, this might just give me some answers. I want to investigate whether the sound of the Laconia's boilers exploding underwater could have brought in sharks from a distance. My plan is to do this using an underwater speaker. Once we're far enough away from the island reef, we'll stop the boat's engines and I'll continue silently by kayak. I've heard that there have been white tips spotted in this area, and what I want to do, I want to just put some pure sound in the water. I don't want any scent, I don't want any visual stimulus, just sound, and see if anything actually responds to that. I've got all the equipment on board, and I'll just leave the main boat a little bit further behind, then I'll get the speaker in the water.
As the name suggests, oceanic whitetips are true open ocean predators. They are able to travel huge distances between feeding when prey is scarce. In the vast expanses of water they travel through, they are constantly on the alert for any unusual occurrence. I'm going to test whether sound in the water can bring sharks in to investigate the source. I'm putting a low-frequency tone through the speaker. A shark's hearing is adapted to very low-frequency vibrations, such as those made by struggling prey. The sound from this speaker has an underwater range of around 800 feet, spreading out in 3 dimensions. That equates to over 80 million cubic feet of water. Now, all I have to do is wait.
Fin just broke the surface right here, right here, right here. Heading this way. I'm guessing about 6 foot under the water.
It's a lone oceanic whitetip.
And it's coming in. And it's just feet away from the speaker. It's actually just within 3 feet of the speaker.
But one lone shark doesn't prove my theory.
One here. Fin out of the water. Right, there was just one. I think, there's at least two now. Right by the speaker, just 2-3 feet away. I think if I was actually in the water, that would be very ominous to see that. I mean, I'm safely, or relatively safely, clear of the water at the moment, but these sharks are definitely interested. They've come in from, I don't know where they were, but they've come in to check out this situation.
And the sharks aren't leaving. They're sticking close to the speaker.
The sharks are circling. They're just hearing the sound and they're circling me.
I'm encouraged that this experiment appears to be working, but I'm now surrounded by sharks longer than my tiny kayak. I'm a little worried they're becoming too interested in me.
Right here, fin on the surface, going down. I get the feeling that I'm being followed. I think one of the creepiest things is actually the fact that, when you're diving, you've got a mask, you can actually see clearly. When you're above the surface is broken like this, you just see that very ghostly grey shape. Oh, here's one right here, right here, right here. And it's coming back.
Without an obvious food source, they've started to turn their attention to the kayak. It's time to turn the speaker off. Eventually, the sharks lose interest in both the speaker and my kayak.
So it does go to underline that if an event happens, it's worth them checking out.
For me, the evidence seems to suggest that the night the Laconia went down, the sound of the boilers exploding brought these sharks in from a large distance. Once at closer range, they detected the Malay at the surface. But this case isn't solved yet. I'm uncovering evidence that suggests that, as well as oceanic whitetips, a bigger and more elusive predator came to investigate that night. I'm back in the area where the Laconia sank, because this investigation has one last twist. I've unearthed something puzzling buried in the eyewitness reports that doesn't seem to match anything I've heard of before. One man says that he saw somebody dragged, in his words, vertically downwards. Moments later, just his empty life jacket re-emerged. What could have done this? Accounts of oceanic white-tip attacks on people seem to follow a pattern. Cautious circling, followed by the strike. And this is similar to some other shark attacks I've investigated. But this description just doesn't seem to fit. The Laconia sank in 12,000 feet of water. I've looked far and wide for suspects, but so far I haven't looked down. A memory surfaces. I've seen photographs of monster sharks snagged in the nets of Atlantic deep-sea trawlers. Huge, bizarre creatures that belong to another world. Are these the creatures I'm now looking for? Were the victims of the Laconia dragged down by a leviathan of the deep? My plan is to head out to deep ocean, off the coast of Ascension Island, as close as I can to where the Laconia sank, and fish as deep as my line will allow to see what will take my bait.
Hundreds of homes.
Basically relocate the tag, and then the logger that takes the information, the environmental information, the depth and the temperature that the shark is at.
Fishing the depths of the Atlantic won't be easy. And catching a real-life sea monster takes big gear.
Big circle hook on the end, attached to about 30 foot of nylon-coated steel wire. And then the actual line is 130 pounds. And on full drag, so it's pretty well locked up. So all we've got to do now, get the bait on, big lump of rock on that, send it down to the bottom, and I'm hoping fairly soon we will find out what's down there.
We rig underwater cameras to record anything on its way up to the boat.
The bait is down on the bottom, and yet anything that happens down there will be transmitted up. The rod top will move, and I could also feel it through my fingertips. It's almost like being a spider in the middle of a web. So now I'm just waiting for a knock on the line.
In preparation for something huge, I put on a fishing harness. But if I'm honest, I don't really know what monsters will be lurking at these depths.
Oh, there's a knock, there's a knock.
Then I feel the gentlest of knocks on the line, before the reel on full drag screams off.
It's going, oh, that is going at speed. That is going very fast.
Whatever has taken the bait down on the bottom has really taken off.
Oh, here we go. It's got something like a tail banging the line.
It doesn't feel like anything I've ever hooked before.
A mystery beast. But it's been really steaming off, taking line. It's a very strong fish. I mean, that is a very strong animal. Very strong animal. It feels like a massive, I was going to say dead weight. It's not dead, it's definitely alive. But it's a weight. I'm breaking quite a sweat here. It's not really gaining anything at the moment. Oh, there we go, it's a little bit of gain there.
I winch it in, turn by painful turn. After nearly an hour of struggle, I might finally see my opponent. Whatever it is now close to the surface.
You can see something down there. A very indistinct outline.
But nothing prepares me for what is revealed on the end of my line.
One way or another, this is sort of end game. There's the fish. There it is.
What I've raised from the deep twists and turns on the line. It's like nothing I've ever seen before.
What is that?
It's easily longer than the width of our boat. I estimate around 12 to 14 feet long.
That's a big old fish. Well hooked. Woo! Right.
Shark scientist Tristan identifies it as a six-gill shark, a primitive creature that inhabits the deep ocean.
Here we go.
This animal has more fossil relatives than living ones.
This is an absolute beast.
It's an incredible opportunity for Tristan. A deep-sea giant like this has never been tagged here before, and the information we might gain could be vital to my investigation. But we only have a short time to get a tag in.
Go for it. Quick. Yes, do that. Fantastic.
Tristan has to rope the tail to get some degree of control. Then he can insert the tag into its dorsal fin.
Do you want those?
Yeah, that's it.
So this is 48 hours, then it'll pop off, is that the idea?
Yeah, this is 48 hours, and this will log temperature, depth and light, and then pop off.
That's in?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, we got the tag in, and I think we've had as good a look as we're going to get.
All right, tail rope off.
We're now releasing the fish. Massive fish, and a creature of the abyss. Is this the first time tags of that kind have been used here, as far as you know?
First time anyone's ever put a satellite tag on a six-gill in Ascension Island. So it'll be very exciting to see what this animal does.
We have a reliable estimate of well over £1,000, something like 1,100 pounds. That is actually the biggest fish that I've ever caught. It's a very special place, very special catch.
But thrilling as this catch was, I still can't place these leviathans at the scene of the Laconia's sinking. These are creatures of the deep. What would they have been doing near the surface? Later, after Tristan has retrieved the data from the tag, he calls me with what might be the glimmer of an answer.
Hello, Tristan.
Hello.
So you got something from the tag? It popped up?
Yeah, so what's pretty exciting is we now know kind of what the six-gill was doing across that period. And what's cool is that they make this what's called a diel vertical migration. So they travel down to the depths during the day and up in the water column during the night. It seems to be the light, so when it hits dusk and dawn, that's when they make these migrations up and down. And they're all probably just tracking prey, squid and things like that. But horizontally, we saw no movement whatsoever.
So they're moving a lot, but it's moving in purely in the up and down direction.
Yeah.
What might be the point of coming up? Are you thinking that they are doing the feeding when they come up shallow?
Yeah, they probably scavenge from carcasses and things like that.
I mean, who'd have thought that little thing that we attached to that fish, that it can give this information? It's just such an insight, isn't it, to what's going on down there?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, bye-bye.
Cheers, take care.
Cheers, adieu,
Bye.
bye-bye. Right, although there are many questions about six-gill sharks still to be answered, this experiment demonstrates very, very clearly this up and down migration that synchronizes absolutely with the passage of night and day. They're down deep during the day, then they rise up at night. And given the fact that the Laconia went down during the hours of darkness, this could be very significant. The only thing is, despite all this amazing technology we've been using, the one thing that it can't tell us is whether six-gill sharks would actually penetrate right down to the depths of the ocean, the so-called bathypelagic zone. This is where no light ever reaches. Thank you.
I've arranged to meet Carl Stanley, owner, builder and captain of the Idabel, a two-man submarine capable of descending to over 2,500 feet. We're going to attach a dead pig to the front of the sub as bait. As I learned from a former cannibal tribe in the South Pacific, pig meat tastes a lot like human flesh. I want to find out if this will bring in the six gills.
This is a slightly different type of baiting up operation for me. I'm used to putting things on big hooks, but I've never actually strapped a dead pig on the front of a submarine before. Normally when I'm fishing, I'm a long way away from the bait and I just get a tactile or maybe an audible indication that something's down there, and at that point I generally don't know what it is, but I'm going to be sitting literally a few feet away from this. So if something comes along and shows an interest in this, I'm going to have a ringside seat. I'm just a couple of feet away.
This is the pressure hull, and that's made out of 3 high-strength steel spheres.
Right, so I take it I'm in that bit there, and is that where you're driving it from?
Yes.
I'm not ashamed to admit that mixed with my excitement is mounting apprehension.
That's where I'm going. It's a wee bit claustrophobic, and under 2,000 feet of water, it's going to be a whole new level of that.
The curved walls make it almost impossible to sit up straight, and I could be spending up to 9 hours cooped up inside here. I'm positioned up front at Carl's feet in what he has dubbed the passenger sphere, which is a cramped 54 inches wide. The plan is to travel vertically down to 2,000 feet or maybe more, then wait and hope that the bait will attract the sharks on their nightly migration up from even deeper.
We're going down into the Cayman Trench, which at its deepest is about 25,000 feet. We're not going quite that deep, but probably a couple of thousand, and I've been told to expect a vertical journey of about 45 minutes.
As we descend, the temperature plummets from 84 degrees Fahrenheit to a chilly 50.
We're just coming up to 500 feet. And as we're descending, I sort of can't help thinking about when the Laconia went down. There were people who jumped in the water, but there were almost definitely going to be people trapped inside the structure as well as it sunk. And that is definitely a one-way trip. Sort of don't want to think about that too much. That's 1,000 feet.
The pressure on the outside of the hull increases as the weight of all that water above us bears down on the sub. At this depth, that equates to 430 pounds on every square inch.
Lights on the sub, so the water here is illuminated, but looking up, I mean, the surface is long past being visible, and where we're actually going, it's where we're going to the edge of the bathypelagic zone. This is where even during the daytime no light reaches down here. The water basically swallows up the light, so it's a very unfamiliar type of space. It's not like the rest of the world. That dark emptiness out there is actually what most of the Earth is like. What we see is a tiny fraction of our planet.
We cautiously approach the sea floor. If we were to get stuck on anything, there would be no hope of rescue. We have enough oxygen for 3 days, but there's no communication with the surface, and no vessel within 1,000 miles capable of descending this deep. And in this complex underwater landscape, it's doubtful anyone could find us anyway.
I almost feel like an astronaut, just minutes away from landing on the moon.
My first glimpse of life down here, a sculptured lobster.
This really does feel like the surface of another planet. No footprints. This is a place where no human being has probably touched down before.
The depth gauge now reads 2,000 feet. We are precariously positioned on a tiny ledge. To my right, a sheer cliff face drops away towards the bottom of the trench, another 5 miles down. The pressure on the outside of the hull now is more than 900 pounds per square inch. A crack would mean instant death.
So, white light at the moment, and we're now going to switch to red light, which the sharks won't be aware of. So we're about to go into stealth mode.
This means that although we can see what's going on, the shark can't see us.
So what we do now is we wait. Hagfish coming right in front of us. So we've got a hagfish that's come in here, and that's starting to feed quite actively. What that's doing, that's stirring up a cloud of scent in the water. There's giant isopods scuttling around as well, which have obviously got wind of something happening here. So there will be a cloud of scent slowly spreading out in the water, and what we're hoping is that that's going to call in the sharks.
Isopods have been observed going 5 years between meals, and in this environment they live in a perpetual state of semi-hibernation. They typically scavenge whatever food drifts down from the surface.
Shark, 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 shark. We've got a shark. Very faint, almost ghost-like, just drifting left to right, just on the edge of visibility. But I'm guessing that wasn't just a sort of a coincidental drift by. I think it's probably picking up the scent. It's turning round, it's turning round. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gill shark. Wow. That's a big animal. Big animal.
I have to remind myself that although I can see it, the shark can't register red light, so it cannot see me or the bait.
Oh, here it comes right over my head.
And since we're not making any sound, it has found us using its sense of scent.
It's now coming towards us, and it seems to be very slowly zeroing in. Is it going to feed? Is it going to feed? Where's it gone now? There it is. It's coming round again. It's coming into the bait. It's coming in. This looks quite purposeful. Look at that. Wow. That is a feeding shark. That's what a feeding shark looks like. It's moving the whole sub. It is actually moving the whole sub. That shark is bigger than the whole sub in terms of length. And I'm literally inches away. Inches away. It's fair to say it's got the taste for the bait. That's amazing. That's amazing.
The bait has been obliterated by the shark's serrated teeth. Like a ghost, it vanishes into the darkness.
Every time you put a bait in the water, you're asking a question, and in this particular instance, my question was, is there life down below the surface layers that might come up? Well, absolutely there is, and some very large and very impressive life. And I have to say that I'm even less comfortable about being down here, so I think it's high time now to get back to the surface.
So what does this tell me about the victims of the Laconia disaster? Could the Six Gill have been involved? What I do know is that these rarely observed giants inhabit the same waters where the Laconia sank. They rise towards the surface at night, the time when many hundreds of people were flailing in the water, and from what I've just witnessed, they tear into flesh with gusto. The sinking of the Laconia sent 2,500 people into the vast Atlantic, and this horrifying event must have attracted a multitude of predators. A marauding school of fanged snook which ripped through in a first wave. Then bloodthirsty parasitic cookie-cutter sharks that cut precision bites. And later, tiger sharks and oceanic white-tips, drawn in first by the sound of the ship's exploding boilers, and then by the blood in the water. And maybe they were joined by this prehistoric leviathan, the six-gill shark, a true sea monster as terrifying as anything from the depths of our imagination. The full story will never be known, but I now understand, in a way that I didn't before, why so many of the Laconia's passengers